like to give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We truly believe that every step we take in this hemisphere, we're trudging in their blood and their suffering. So we always acknowledge them, and acknowledge them not just in an abstract sense, but in the sense that this is still their land. I don't care if you steal something from someone 1,000 years ago, it still belongs to them. It doesn't belong to you. So we always want to acknowledge that this is their land, and all of us are guests here, and we should act as guests in relationship to the indigenous people. So we just want to acknowledge that. And then we'll go into it. Hannah gave a good introduction. I just wanted to add a little bit so you know, like, why is this guy in California talking to us about events we're organizing in Oregon? Like, what does he know about that? Well, actually, quite a bit. I am from San Francisco, born and raised, but I did live in Oregon for 10 years, 7.5 years in Portland, 2.5 years in Bend, working for SEIU, who was my employer, the labor union. And so I spent a lot of time in Oregon. And as Hannah said, I'm a longtime organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which is a independent revolutionary Pan-African political party based in Africa. And I'm still a little bit, I guess I would say, depressed by the fact that right now I'm actually supposed to be in Zimbabwe. I had a ticket, but when all of this the pandemic crisis happened, obviously I was not able to go. So as soon as it becomes safe to do that, I will go there. I go to Africa every year to do work for my organization. But in terms of the Rural Organizing Project, the way that I became connected with working with the Rural Organizing Project, with ROP, was the middle point there. Back in 2014, my good friend, Sister Walida Marisha, who I'm sure a lot of you know, she lives in Portland and has created this wonderful presentation, Why There Are No Black People in Oregon. And she did the presentation in Grants Pass in 2014. And I was meeting her to have coffee. And she told me that there were some neo-Nazis that showed up there and threatened her. And, you know, she didn't feel like she had safe passage to leave the event. So I told her, when she told me that, I told her, HELL, no. Like, the next time you go, I'm going with you, and I'm getting some people to go with you. And so she formalized it and introduced me to the wonderful people at ROP, and we formalized it where we accompanied her on a couple of the tours she did. And from that, you know, we built a wonderful relationship with Jess and Cara, and we were able to translate that into the 2016 tour, where Jessica went to 11 towns, rural towns in Oregon, to talk about the onslaught of the right-wing militia groups. They asked me to, again, organize a security team to escort them, and we did that. We went to all 11 towns with them. The picture you see there is me in the back. There, I think that's Albany. I remember that one from 2016, because that's the event where the guy in the audience said that Black women and white women have different gestation cycles. I'll never forget that. That was very interesting to me. So I'm just making that point to explain to you that, you know, I've been there. I'm not just an outsider talking to you about these security techniques. I'm not talking to you about something that is just in my head. I'm talking to you about work that we've done in rural Oregon that I was myself a part of. What I'm about to share with you is actually a training that we did in all 11 of those towns in 2016 in person. So, you know, work with me, because I'm trying to, I spent time trying to figure out how to do it virtually as well as it could possibly done. But we did it in all 11 of those towns in 2016 to a number of people who work with ROP in towns from Baker City to LeGrand to Redmond to Scappoose to Lincoln City, Tillamook, all over Medford, Grants Pass, all over Oregon. We did that. And so, you know, just the last note about that, the election night in 2016, as I'm sure all of you know, the reason why I have so much respect for ROP is that a lot of the work that we do in the AAPRP is about building revolutionary capacity in our communities, building up our communities. I'll be honest with y'all, I have no faith in this government to solve any problem for us. This government, in my view, is built on oppressing and exploiting us. So I don't see the solution coming from that direction. So we're involved in attempting to build that on a worldwide basis. And I truly believe that the most important contribution that people of European descent who really want to contribute towards justice can do is organizing other people from their communities in anti-racist work, in anti-patriarchal work, in anti-homophobia work. And so ROP is one of the few organizations that we see that's actually doing that work. So that's the reason why we have so much respect for ROP and would not hesitate to do anything to support anything that ROP is doing. And as I said, in November 2016, after all the threats that were aimed at the leadership of ROP because of the work being done to expose the militias, I spent that election night parked on a road in Cottage Grove, making sure that nobody came up that road that wasn't supposed to come up that road. And if they had come up that road, it would have been a very bad night for them. So I'm just saying all this to you all so you understand that, you know, I'm not an outsider talking to you. I've touched that ground intimately. And so what we're about to share in the next few minutes are just some of the things that we practice all the time, all over the world, and they're very effective techniques. And then we'll leave time afterwards to, you know, for questions and comments and anything. And then I just want to say publicly that, you know, we're revolutionaries. So we do our work because we love humanity and we want justice. So, you know, after this conversation, if it's like, you know, that sounded pretty good, but I really need more help, I'm saying publicly, like, you can feel free to reach out one-on-one. We can talk about it. We can work through it, up to and including me coming up there to Oregon, if that's necessary, to help in any way possible. So, you know, that's something that we're out there to do. You know, we don't do our work for money. We do it, again, for justice. So just putting that out there. And we can talk about that if that's something that, you know, people need going forward. So we'll start with just talking about what we're talking about, because again, the whole purpose of this is to talk about de-escalation techniques, right? De-escalating conflict. So where does that start? And I would say that the first question that you have to ask yourself when you're thinking about de-escalation is why are you here? Like, why do you do this work? And I would like to encourage you all to, you know, go ahead and write like a sentence in the chat while we're going through this. Like, think about, why do you do this work? And just write a sentence in the chat, why you're here, why you do this work. You know, what is it that inspires you to do the work that you do? And then along with that, you know, while you're doing that, a very critical part of that, and the reason why I asked that question is because how you approach the work, like what position you're in, what psychological, spiritual position you're in is crucial to how you will report to the work and respond to the work. And what I mean by that is I encounter people all the time who are, you know, they call themselves activists, they're involved in various stages of work, and they'll say things to me like, well, I don't even like people. And, you know, I just flat don't understand that. Like, how can you expect to do inspirational work around people when you don't even, you don't even want to be around people? And I'm not talking about, like, I understand if you're introverted, believe it or not, I'm introverted, but that's different. Being introverted is different than saying you don't like being around people. That's a whole different level. And you don't have any faith and respect for people, because then you're really not in a healthy position to do this work. Like, I went to a meeting recently and there was a young person there. They were telling me, well, I'm an individualist and I'm a nihilist and I don't believe. Well, I'm like, why are you here then? Because this meeting is about people who want to get together to solve problems. So if you don't believe in that, like, why are you here? You should just leave. You know, so it's really important that we check where we are spiritually, where we are psychologically. Like, do you believe that people have the potential to improve? Do you believe that we all can be better people? Because if you don't believe that, then that's an impediment for conflict de-escalation work. I mean, you have to really believe that you can reach people to do conflict de-escalation work. You have to believe that. So that obviously doesn't mean, you know, if someone's violent and antagonistic, that you have to be like, oh, well, there's somewhere in there they can change. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that you have to have an ability to have faith in people. You know, to be quite honest, when we organized the security tour in 2016, there were a few of us who our job was physical interaction if that was necessary. And then we had the conflict de-escalation people on top of that, or before that, you know, before it got to that point. But, you know, I was not there to engage in conflict de-escalation. I was there to physically secure people. So that is an important element to have, and I totally support that. But if you're going to do conflict de-escalation work, you have to be at that place where you believe that people can improve. And even if you're doing any other kind of work, like physical security work in the movement, you still need to, whatever work you're doing, you need to do that. It's based on the principle of what Che Guevara talked about, that revolution and struggle is based in love. And I believe that it's based in love. So if you don't have a good feeling about yourself, then it's going to be very difficult for you to have the patience, for you to have the care and empathy to effectively do this work. So that's just something you have to think about, you know, when you get into this, before you get into this. You have to think about where you are spiritually and mentally. Are you in a good place to work with people? So, and then it's just critical to make the principles of justice, the principles of peace, the principles of humanity over profit, to make those a part of your work. Because if you believe all of those things, it's going to manifest itself in how you interact with people. And that'll come across to them when you're interacting with them. I'm sure we all have had the experience where we've gone to a restaurant or a store or wherever, and someone has talked to us like, you know, they don't even see us as human beings. And they didn't have to say, like, I don't see you as you're not valuable to me as a human being. The way they treated us clearly manifested that to us. And so when that happened, that didn't make us feel good. You know, it made us feel bad, and it made us probably feel a certain type of way about the person we were interacting with. So if you're doing conflict de-escalation work and those vibes come from you to the person you're trying to de-escalate, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. In fact, it'll probably go the other way, the bad way. So, you know, before you even start your event, and again, you know, the way this has been done before, it was done in actual events. So we knew exactly what the event was. Obviously, in this training, we don't know. You may be planning outdoor events. You may be planning marches, rallies. You may be planning indoor events. We don't know. So work with, you know, the material, but it's kind of a generic approach. So what I'm saying here is start your day before the event with whatever type of spiritual mental check you need to engage in to prepare yourself for the work you need to do that way. And I'm not talking about religion. You know, my saying is don't let religion interfere with your spirituality. That's what I believe. So I'm not talking about that. I'm pretty sure if I walked in a church or a mosque, I'd probably explode. So I'm not, if that's you, that's great, but that's not where I'm coming from. I'm not coming from that narrow perspective. I'm saying whatever you believe, whatever you have to use to prepare yourself, then do that before you go in. Like if you stay up all night partying, or you have an intense argument with a housemate or a partner or something, and then you're going to do an event the next day, you have to do the work to make sure you're in a healthy place to do that. If you just carry all of that negativity into that, it's going to impact your ability to be effective. That's the point I'm making. And so again, you know, continue to write in the chat, like, why are you here? Like, what is it that motivates you? Because that's, whatever that is, whether your answer is, well, it's Jesus, it's Allah, it's Jehovah, whether it's because I just think people should be more important than money, whatever that is what you hang on to guide you in terms of your spiritual and mental focus. That's the part you hang on to. For me, what I use is, I feel like the fact that I'm here today, that I'm able to do this work is an honor. I feel like it's a privilege for me. I feel like the people who came before me sacrificed so much to allow me to be in the position to make whatever type of contribution I can make. And so I feel like I was born in debt. I feel like everybody's born in debt, really. And I feel like I have that responsibility to humanity to continue to pay what I've benefited from. And that's for me is what drives me to do this work. Like, it's not about, oh, I can make some money. No, that would be an insult to my ancestors who struggled so hard and received nothing except bumps and bruises and oftentimes death. So you have to find what it is that motivates you. And so hopefully, as you write it in the chat, you can, if you haven't, thought that through, that'll give you an opportunity to say, okay, this is my thing. This is what drives me. Okay. So again, working with me, the diagram on the left is a crude example of, say it's a march, then that's 3 rows of people marching. If it's an indoor event, that's 3 rows of chairs. Okay. So ideally, as I mentioned last week, ideally, you want to try to have 2 people for your conflict de-escalation squad for every 50 people you have present. Ideally, that would be great if you have that. Oftentimes, as we know, that's not the reality. So, of course, you always work with what you have. But if you have people, that's what you want to do. The more, the merrier. But you want to make sure they're stationed. Like, if that's the room and the top of the screen is forward, whether it's a podium in an indoor event or outdoor event or a march, then you want to make sure you position your folks in the perimeter areas where they can see everybody and everybody can see them at all times. So if this is an indoor event, you want to have people posted up in these areas, like you saw me posted up in the picture a couple of slides ago. I would do that. I was there for the doorway. Everybody that came in the door in these rural Oregon towns, who is this big black dude here? Where'd he come from? And that's exactly the impact we wanted. And you don't have to be a big black dude. You can be anybody, but the fact that you're there and you're identified as someone working with conflict de-escalation, we talked about identifying your people, whether it's through tape on the arm or conflict de-escalation written on tape across your body or whatever it is, you're identified so that when people come in on a subconscious level, they're like, okay, conflict de-escalation people, they know that. And that the idea is to have that psychological impact on them as they're in the room, they know that exists, okay? So another thing is make sure you arrive early at your location, okay? That's something, we practiced that verbatim in the 2016 tour that we did with Jess. We would get there an hour early every single time. And if it's an outdoor location, you wanna take time to survey the area. Make sure you just understand what's in the area where your event is taking place. Like if there's a truck parked there and it doesn't, I would take a look at it to see what's in the truck, what's going on there. Just make sure you're aware. And if there's anything that like really just doesn't feel right, you're gonna need to get people together and figure out like what type of approach you want to engage in to address that. If it's indoors, then I would suggest you just search the whole place. If there's a kitchen, search through all the cabinets, search everything to make sure you know what's there. And you might be like, oh, wow, I don't see why that's necessary. This is one of those things where it's better to prepare and not need it than to not prepare and need it. So I'm a staunch follower of that practice, like searching and making sure you know that the location that you're in is safe. So you have to arrive early to do that, because once people start coming, it's much more difficult to accomplish this. And if you want more details about how to do that, I'm happy to help you with that. So kind of said that, looking around to make sure you know what's there. And then, again, strategically positioning the people at various places in your march and or your indoor event, whatever it is. Okay, so now let's talk about de-escalation techniques. So this picture here, you all probably saw it. It was a picture that one of these open up, whatever, I can't even call it a protest, one of these parades or whatever they want to call it. I saw one here in Sacramento where I live it looked like a parade to me, so that's what I call them. So this event, they had people there. In this instance, they had this nurse was there, like trying to plead with these people to practice some social distancing techniques and wear masks and whatever. But I want you all to just pay attention to, you know, obviously this individual to the left with the flag, like he has a very aggressive demeanor to me because he's approaching her with something that can be used as a weapon, and he's, you know, in my view, violating her personal space. So he has an aggressive stance. But notice her disposition. It's very calm. She's maintaining direct eye contact with him. You know, I would like to see more physical space between her and him from a conflict de-escalation standpoint. But that's not, again, this is not what she's doing. So I'm not, you know, in any way throwing shade at her. But I'm saying for your notice, like I would like to see maybe another 1.5 feet at minimum. But everything else that she's doing here is perfect. Her calm demeanor. The only thing is, I probably wouldn't, in a conflict de-escalation, I would keep my hands at my sides. I wouldn't fold them or do anything with my hands. I certainly wouldn't be gesturing with my hands. And I'll explain more about that in a second. But just notice that overall, this is kind of a general picture of what the situation would look like when you're engaging in conflict de-escalation. So if you think about the previous slide, when we talked about people positioned in the room, the job of your conflict de-escalation people is to watch the crowd. If it's the march, to watch the march. If it's a rally, to watch the people in the rally. If it's a indoor event, to watch the people sitting down, watch people coming in, watch people leaving. And you have to practice that, because if you're not used to it, it can be uncomfortable staring at people. You know, because that's literally what you're there to do, is stare at them. And you can do it with a smile. I encourage you to do it with a smile, but you need to pay attention to them. You're not there to pay attention to the speakers. You're not there to clap for good things that are said, because when you're doing that, you're distracted from paying attention to things that can escalate in the audience. So you're not there to enjoy the event. Unfortunately, that's not your role. Your role is to make sure people are safe. So you have to make sure you're paying attention to the crowd 100% of the time. And that may mean, you know, if a lot of people aren't used to that, you know, I'm from the old school, you know, you put me in a post for 10 hours, I stand there until somebody else comes, because that's all I know. That's how I was trained. But, you know, in this new age, people have more humanity, which is a wonderful thing. And so you may, you know, if you have people who can spell people, you know, people can stand for 40 minutes or whatever, and then you can replace them and take shifts and take breaks. That's wonderful. If you have enough people to do that, that's absolutely wonderful. Because if people, you know, don't wear themselves out, they'll be more alert. Okay, so keeping your eyes on the crowd at all times and having the alternatives, people meaning is meant by alternatives, if you have that. And then stay alert. The reason why you're watching the crowd is you want to be alert for any agitated behaviors, and you want to be proactive. So one of the things that happened pretty much everywhere we went in 2016 is, you know, these constitutionalist people, they would always get up and go on these rants about patriots and how we needed to protect ourselves against tyranny, and all this stuff, which, you know, again, all of that was very interesting to me, because I'm an African that grew up in housing projects in Hunters Point in San Francisco, and I'm going to these rural Oregon towns and these people are talking about tyranny. Like, that was just amazing to me. It still is, just thinking about it. But still, I didn't, you know, I still was focused on the crowd the whole time. So no matter what's said, you have to make sure you're staying alert, staying focused. If someone, and I think the guiding criteria you can use is if someone is talking and they're expressing a point, they can say whatever they want to say. But if they start attacking people, and what I mean by attacking people, attacking ideas is always okay. There's never a situation where someone should not be able to attack an idea they don't agree with. But when people start attacking individuals, then that's a red flag for you to pay close attention, because a lot of times what comes after that is escalation. Okay. So for example, if someone's saying, well, I don't agree with you, you're a pig, you shouldn't be here, you're this and that, homophobic, racist, patriarchal things, whatever it is, that's when you want to pay close attention. And that's crossing the line. So when you have people doing that, that's a signal to you that that's something where conflict de-escalation needs to be happening at that point. Okay, so as long as they're talking about, I don't agree with what's being said here, I don't believe all lives matter. If they're doing that, then you have to kind of decide if it's at a point where it's disruptive of the event, then that's your point of notice that it's time for conflict de-escalation. But if you're an indoor event, for example, and you're calling on people and someone waits to be called upon and they get up to speak and they're saying, well, I just think all lives matter. Okay, that's not in and of itself a conflict de-escalation, unless they do one of the things I just talked about. Okay, so we can talk about that if that's still not clear to folks. Okay, so when you have an agitated person, someone does cross the line, they're yelling, they're saying homophobic things, they're saying racist things, they're saying patriarchal things, they're saying anything like that that's rude and belligerent. They're acting a certain way, they're upset, they're agitated, they're standing around, pacing around angrily, anything. They have the energy like this guy in the picture. Then the minute that happens, that's when your conflict de-escalation people have to engage. They have to engage at that point, and they have to engage immediately. Okay, and we'll talk about what that looks like. So just remember, when you start to engage, which means walking over towards the person that's agitated, you want to be looking them in the eye at all times. Even if they're not looking at you, find the eye contact with them. Be assertive about finding eye contact with them. Why? Because when people are looking you in the eye, it's a scientific fact that the brain molecules, they automatically they have to be a little more accountable to you. And that's what you want. That's the reason why they're not looking you in the eye, because they don't want to be accountable. And, I remember when we were in Medford for the event in 2016, a group of, I think they were from the Odin, whatever it is, the Odin white supremacist group, the Norse god Odin, whatever, they had that on their insignia. And I'm standing at the door. They came in with the Confederates and the swastikas and all that. It was like 8 or 9 of them. And it was just myself and the young organizer who was at the table. And that person at the table maintained sharp eye contact with all of them, signing the people in. And me by myself at the door, I maintained sharp. None of them would look at me. Not one of them would look at me. And that's when I knew we were going to be good, because I knew they don't have if they couldn't even look at me, that's because they knew they were wrong. So you want to maintain eye contact, because you're right. The reason why you're out there is right. The values that you're exposing are correct. So you don't need to look away. You need to look at them. You need to hold them accountable. So eye contact is essential. And then you want to make sure you're standing no closer than 4 feet when you engage the person or persons who are being disruptive. You want to give them space. Why? Obviously, because you don't want to give them the opportunity to physically strike out at you. And you don't want to give the impression that you're posing any kind of physical threat to them. So 4 feet is a good diameter to use while maintaining that eye contact. And then you also, like if there's 2 of you or if there's more of you, you want to make sure you give them a way to leave. You don't want to surround them so that, they feel like they're being surrounded and they have to fight to save themselves. You want to give them a clear path to walk away. We don't necessarily want them to walk away, but you want to just make sure you provide them the space to do that. Because oftentimes they will, and they need to be able to do that. They don't need to feel like you're holding them hostage by surrounding them. So make sure those 3 things are essential: eye contact, proper distance, and giving them an escape route. Okay, so let's talk about what you actually do in conflict de-escalation. So you can rephrase this any way you like. This is really what we talk to people about using when we've done this before, and it's very effective. But you can adjust it as you see fit. So just something along this line. Eye contact. Remember, space. Give them an escape route, and you're looking them straight in the eye, and you're saying in a very calm voice, but in a loud and firm voice. You can't whisper it. That's not going to work. You need to be, loud and firm, so that he's not abrasively loud, but loud so that it's clear, like how I'm talking right now. So you would say, I just want you to know, like, we're happy you're here. We're happy you have some passion about you. And we want you to march or meet, whatever you're doing, with us. But we're just asking you that you have to please stop what you're doing right now. Please stop, or we're just going to please have to ask you to leave. And that last part, you want to say it repeatedly. You might say it 20 times. You're welcome to be here, but we're asking you to please stop what you're doing right now, or please leave. Please stop or please leave. You can just meld it all the way down to that. Please stop or please leave. Eye contact, space, escape route. Please stop or please leave. Now, the psychology of this is that you all are doing this at the same time. So, we're all, people are collective beings. I know there's a capitalist society and we're all trained about, individualism, but that's a farce. People are social beings. We're trained to be collective. And if any of you don't believe that, I'll just give you a quick example to demonstrate that. Because if you have cats, for example, I'm sure a lot of people do, or, I have these parakeets here, like your cat, your parrot, whatever it is, they may stay in your house. They may be an indoor cat. They don't go outside. They never see another cat. They've never been exposed to another cat in their entire life. But they still behave like cats. They're still social. Their socialization is still that of cats. They still like cat food. They still meow. They still chase mice, even though they've never seen another cat since they've been old enough to understand what that means. They still socialize like that. So cats, to me, if they could speak, they have the right to say, I don't need anybody. I did all this by myself. They have a right to say that. But human beings don't, because science has proven that if a human is left in the woods as a baby and is raised by wolves, then that human being will grow up and they will not talk as we're talking right now. They'll bark like wolves. They'll eat bones like wolves. They'll get down on all fours and they'll do their absolute best to make a contribution to wolf culture. So because we know this, there's none of us can say, well, we're just individuals. No, we're wired to be collective. So when you have multiple people saying the same thing to someone, and it's the correct thing, because this is the correct thing to be saying in that environment, then the neurons in people's brains, part of them has to listen to that. And then not only them, but people in the audience who are not even a part of your conflict de-escalation team will activate themselves. And what you'll find is they'll start doing the same thing. So before you know it, you have 5 or 6 people saying this to someone. And so 99.9% of the time, 99.9% of the time, that person is just at some point is going to just stop, and they're either going to calm down or they're going to leave. Either or. And that's the best that you can accomplish. Now, we would like, if it's possible, if it's feasible, and if it's, if it makes sense, we would like, and you can, you have to use your best judgment here. But if you feel like there's a clear opportunity to have a reasonable conversation with this person, then leave. When they go to leave, walk with them a little bit and talk to them a bit. Don't put yourself in danger. Like use your best judgment, but talk to them, because it's an opportunity to help them understand, why you're there and what you're doing. So, just keep the door open for that. If they're hostile, obviously none of that is going to apply. You just want them to leave. But if they're not, if they're just genuinely confused, and we all know how to determine that. for someone, then use that opportunity to try to talk to them and see if we can help them understand what's going on. Okay. So another thing is you have to make sure that, you know, you've already established like the pre-agreed upon protocols or the common definitions for what represents a threat. So I gave you some examples that I hope are helpful. Like, to me, anytime someone starts using abusive language, racist language, homophobic language, patriarchal language, and, you know, in other words, anti-African, anti-colonized people language, anti-women language, anti-LGBTQ language, anti-human language. Anytime somebody, like, even if say, for example, a man of European descent stands up and there's a man of European descent talking to him and he calls him a name like a B, falls in this category. So anything like that, abusive language, that's the need for conflict de-escalation is needed. Anytime someone's engaging in aggressive behavior, like the picture we just showed, that's where conflict de-escalation is needed. Anytime someone is behaving in erratic behavior, that's when conflict de-escalation is needed. Heckling, conflict de-escalation is needed. All of those things. But if someone is just speaking in turn in an event and they're just their view, if they're speaking out of turn, then that might be conflict de-escalation time. But if they're just speaking, they've been called upon, but their view is, you know, something that you consider absurd, they have a right to express that. You know, we have to have faith in the process. So we can't say they're being disruptive because they're saying Black women and white women have different gestation cycles. You know, when that person said that at that event I showed you where I was in the picture, the audience took care of it. We didn't have to do anything. The audience talked so much to that person that they just got up and left. You know, so you don't have to. We're not here to police people. You know, I would not be at the event if that was our objective. I would not be talking to you if that was what you were trying to do. You know, we're not here to police behavior. We're here to try to build community. You know, so just keep that in mind. And then we need to practice and assess our strategies. And what I mean by that in terms of developing permanent structures is make sure that, like, if you have conflict de-escalation people, try to get a team to commit to perform that function on a consistent basis. And then you can develop your training techniques. You can, you know, get stronger at it, but try to make it a permanent part of your structure for your organization of what you're doing and a permanent part of your events. I hate to say it, but I think that unfortunately going forward, it's going to be something we're going to need to be doing on a consistent basis. You know, some of us have always been doing it, but I think we're going to have to, you know, escalate our ability to have this type of work available. So make sure you do what you can to, you know, put that in place so that you have it all the time for all of the events that you're doing. So I think at this time, I had questions there, but what I'd like to do is just take 5 minutes to send people out to breakout rooms. And the purpose of the breakout rooms is we just want to have you practice with each other. I know it's hard virtually, but it's still better than nothing. So just practice, like pick someone to be an antagonistic person, and then practice saying the words that I gave you or whatever words you want to repeat, but make sure your words are words of warmth, firmness, but warmth. So the words I had were firm, but they were warm words. They were like, we're glad you're here. We want you to stay, but we have to ask you to please stop what you're doing or please leave. That's not a rude statement. You know, there's nothing wrong with telling someone that. So that's what you want to practice something along those lines. What you don't want to do, and this has happened a lot, what you don't want to do is say, you need to get out of here. That's not conflict de-escalation. That's conflict escalation. You know, or, you know, so you want to say something that's, because a lot of times people are acting out like that because they feel alienated. So we don't want to say things to them to make them feel more alienated. You know, because I can tell you, if I were white in rural America, I would feel alienated too. The only problem with that is that, you know, they want to they want to blame that on people like me that have absolutely nothing to, like, they need to be, their anger needs to be directed at the ruling class, in my opinion. So, you know, but they feel alienated, and that's a justifiable alienation. So we want to say things that make it clear to them that they're welcome there, but their behavior that they're engaging in at that moment is not. But they are welcome if they change their behavior. And you would be shocked at how effective that is with people, because oftentimes they're just looking for that. They're looking for someone to tell them that they're okay, because everything that we experience in this society is always telling us there's something wrong with us. And they're looking for something to tell them that that's, you know, that's okay, that they're wanted. And so many times people just respond to that. So I'd like to just take 5 minutes, if we could send people to the breakout rooms and go ahead and practice that for just 5 minutes, and then we'll come back if people have comments or questions. Hannah, is that cool if we do that? Perfect.
Hi, y'all, just 1 second.
Okay, sure.
And you should get a notification to join the breakout room if you can't join the breakout.
So I know that wasn't a lot of time, but the group that I was in, you know, I expressed to them, you all, like, it's like anything else in life, you have to practice it. You have to practice it. If you don't practice it, you won't do it. You won't respond in the moment. You think you will, but you won't. You won't respond in the moment because you won't know how to do that. And the way you do that is you have to train yourself. So I want to encourage you in your organizations, in your areas, to practice that, because if you practice it, you will get a lot better at doing it. The reason why I think that, you know, there's a strong level of respect and trust between the work that I do, for example, and ROP, is that they know if I'm there doing security, if they know if someone runs towards the stage, they are not gonna make it. I'm not gonna hesitate. I'm not gonna be like, oh, should I do something? They know. And the only reason why I'm not gonna hesitate is because I've done it so many times. So many times that my daughter is like, Daddy, you need to, you know, it's somebody else's turn, train other people how to do it. So that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm doing this. But practice it, practice it, practice it. And the more you practice it, the better at it you'll get. So it's not about 5 minutes, now you know how to do it, because it doesn't work that way. You have to practice it. And the more you practice it, you know, you'll get better at it. So I wanted to just leave time. I know we started a little late, but I'm trying to be respectful of time. So if there are any questions or comments, you want to throw something virtually, this would be the time to do that.
I'd like to say something, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm Bree from Klamath Falls. I don't know if you all saw, but my county made national news for our militia efforts and how antagonistic the militia members were to protesters. But from what I saw with boots on the ground as a protester myself, is not only, I wasn't de-escalating the militia members so much as I was de-escalating my own side. And I think it's important to think about that, because a lot of your discussion is about de-escalating folks who may not agree with you. But from what I saw, I was having to de-escalate folks who agreed with me, but were like overly aggressive about it, or like rising, being antagonized and getting swept up in that and having to like keep our group focused. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, actually, sorry that was not communicated clearly. That's for everybody, you know, because sometimes people rise up and someone's disagreeing and they want to fight them or whatever. So the conflict de-escalation is for anyone that's disruptive of the work you're doing, no matter what side they're on. Absolutely.
Bree, I just wanted to piggyback on that. The issues that were happening in Klamath were happening all throughout rural Oregon. In Dallas, we had a similar response, and there was an individual on a second-story building with a loaded gun pointed at about 10 to 15 protesters. When something like that happens, and the police are present and know that's occurring, and nothing, that they don't do anything, is there, I guess that situation floored me. I mean, I feel very fortunate to not have to walk out the door in fear of being shot on a daily basis. So, you know, it is what it was, but I just, it was eye-opening.
So if I can say this, I think, again, that gets back to the point that I raised about you have to make sure your team, you have a clear plan for what's going to happen with the event. And part of that plan has to be, so something like that is non-negotiable, right? Someone pointing a gun at people is non-negotiable. So you're going to have to establish, like, that's another thing you have to practice. Like, if something like that happens, my recommendation is that at that point you have to shut things down. I mean, you can't take that risk, right? So you have to shut things down. You have to stop people. I assume, if I understood you correctly, you're marching by a building. So you need to turn people around at that point, and that's not going to happen unless you have a plan. Everybody's on the same page, and they know, okay, we come to this building, there's a threat on this building, we're turning around, and everybody, when they hear that, they automatically know what to do to get people to turn around. But you don't want to, like, continue and try to go through something like that because you don't know what can happen.
Ahjamu, there's a
Thanks,
question.
Ahjamu. Could I? Oh, yep, that's what I was going to do. Go for it, Emma.
In the chat box from Lily that says, do you have any advice for when you become aware that folks from the quote unquote other side are surveilling or infiltrating your group, if they're not being antagonistic or are being, I think that says, quiet?
So when you say surveilling, like, what do you mean specifically? Like, watching people how? Like, what exactly is happening? Like, are people being watched at their houses, or what are we talking about?
Yeah, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a vigil in a small town where we are in Colorado, where there were counter protesters across the street from us, but then we became aware that members of the counter protesters were, like, amongst the crowd, and crowd members were not aware of it. And there was a handful of folks who were in the crowd and some who were, like, positioned around outside of the crowd watching.
Mm. So, you know, I think, like, the best you can do in a circumstance like that is you can decide to have a level of organization where, like, if these groups have social media, Facebook pages or whatever, a lot of times they're talking about this stuff on there, and I'll explain why I say that in a second. So you can decide to have people monitoring them, you know, so that you can try to figure out what they're doing. You can do that. I don't know, you know, I mean, if they're just in the crowd, I think you have to expect that that's going to happen. Like, they're going to have people in the crowd. So I wouldn't get too carried away with it unless they're doing something to be disruptive. But I can tell you that the tour that we did a few years ago that I've mentioned a few times. So, you know, the way we had set that up, right, we wanted to take the attention off of Jessica, because she was doing the presentations. We wanted to take the attention off of her because she had received all of these physical threats, and some of them had attempted to carry them out. So we wanted to keep the attention off of her. So the way we did that is because I would attract so much attention. Like, I'm 6'3", 220 pounds, and I attract attention in America. So I was always at the front door of every event, and I was always dressed in, you know, the typical radical attire that I mean, like, in rural Oregon, I was impossible to miss. And that was our strategy. And so as a result of that, what we found out, because we had people monitoring, like, on social media, they talk, that big black man there, we need to do something about that. The sheriff, the Grant County sheriff, was talking about the big black man and all that. So we didn't do anything in relationship to that because we had our protocols. We knew what was going to happen. We knew if a disruption happened, how we were going to get the ROP staff out of there, where we were going to do that, who was going to do that, who's going to do what. So we didn't, you know, as long as you have a plan, that's my point. We didn't feel like we had to react to them saying that. In fact, I thought it was kind of funny, you know, that that I could just travel through rural Oregon and get so much attention. Like, that was funny to me. So as long as you know, to me, I believe in what Kwame Ture said, organization decides everything. If you have a clear plan for your event, you have scenarios set up for exigencies that happen, then I don't think you have to, feel like you have to be in front of everybody on every little thing. Like, you just have a plan in case there's a disruption to keep people safe. That's the main thing. And as I said before, like, if you need help with that, willing to help you develop that, because you can't develop that kind of plan in 45 minutes. But if you need help, we can help you do that. But that's the key there, I think.
Thanks, Ahjamu. There's another question in the chat box that a couple people are also wanting to hear about. How do you recommend presenting these security issues to event organizers?
Well, I think the key is, like, when you call people together, I think the inoculation approach is the best approach. And what I mean by that is, so you say, hey, we want to build a conflict de-escalation team, and you invite 20 people to come. So once they get there, you need to be as honest with them as possible. So, like, when I do it, what we would tell people is, we're not calling the police, because the police are a part of the problem. They support these militia people. So we're not calling the police. We would tell people that straight up. Like, if there's a conflict in here, we're going to handle that conflict. That's what we're here to do. So, if you're uncomfortable with that, you shouldn't participate. So that's just an example. Like, be very honest with people. Like, this is what we want you to do. Like, how do you feel about doing that? We want you to engage people that may be hostile. They might spit on you. They might, who knows what'll happen. Like, if you're not mentally prepared to do that, it gets to what I was talking about in the beginning, then, you should try to help us another way. And just be very honest about telling them, what you need them to know about conflict de-escalation, which is, all of the things we've talked about and other things. Just putting that out there with them and paying attention to how they respond to that. Because if they tell you, yeah, I don't know, I'm really, like, it really makes me uncomfortable, then that's probably not what they need to be doing, and that's okay. But I think you have to inoculate them. Like, don't make promises you can't keep. Don't tell people, we're all going to be there, everything's going to be fine. You don't know that. We would tell people, because people would ask, well, is it going to be dangerous? And I'm like, y'all live here. All these people come everywhere with guns. Like, well, I'm not going to stand here. I'm a visitor. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that you're safe here. Anything can happen tonight. So we're here to be prepared for that. Mentally, spiritually, and physically prepared for that. So I think that's how you have to talk to people. You just have to tell them honestly what's going on. And if they're not up to it, that's fine. Better to know then than at the moment of truth.
I think we probably have time for one more question. Does anybody want to pop off mute? I know there's a couple of things in the chat box too, and I know there's probably going to be some unresolved questions we won't have time to get to tonight. So folks, if you put a question in the chat box that we don't get to, or there's something burning on your mind, also please know you can reach out to ROP staff after this. We're happy to keep being a thinking partner and help support you in your planning. But I'll leave room for one more question now, and if anybody wants to throw something in.
So I was wondering if Ahjamu thinks that having the whole crowd like repeat a vow or a chant about how they're going to be nonviolent, or going over the nonviolence kind of principles, how you feel about that, if that's a good way to start an event. Or I've had good success with that, but
Yeah.
I really wanted to know what you thought of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you were here Sunday, or I don't know how many of you were here, or I'm sorry, Thursday last week, but in that session, like I talked about, a critical thing to do is have whoever is moderating, emceeing, constantly have this, be talking, like you're saying, constantly talk about the theme of, we're here to build community. Everybody's welcome that wants to build community. We're here to take care of each other. You need to have someone constantly relaying that message, because what it'll do is that'll resonate with people, and it'll impact people's behavior. You know, I've used this technique at events that were dominated by Bloods and Crips, and it's worked. You know, you talking to people like that, because somewhere within people, that's what they want. Even though that may not be what they're doing every day, that's really what they want. So talking to people about that and seeing that manifest itself where, you know, Bloods are like, hey, Blood, we're here to get along with each other. We're not here for all that today, you know, because they've been hearing that message constantly. So yes, I think it's great to, whatever way you do it, singing, but that constantly needs to be said by whoever's doing chants. Anything that you're doing to communicate with people, that has to be, you can't just say it once or twice. It has to be constantly reiterated, constantly reinforced. And I think that's a critical point of your event, being able to avoid any problems.
When I really appreciated your emphasis on all the things you talked about today, and also the need for practice, and I hope people will form practice groups.
Awesome. Well, that is a good transition. I know it's getting late, so thank you all so much for participating tonight actively and practicing, and just being here as we respond to the movement for Black Lives, demanding that folks take action now in defense of Black lives. This is such important work that we're doing. Learning this, practicing it over and over again, and sharing these skills with our communities is so important, because de-escalation is one part of creating the world that we want to live in, where everyone and every community, excuse me, is truly safe, and every community is welcoming for all. So really appreciate you all doing the work in your local communities and being with us tonight. Please reach out. We are online at rop.org, and we would love to help you in forming a group, in joining ROP's multiracial network, in creating an action plan or a safety plan, or figuring out what it looks like to practice this in your local community and local context. We'll be sending out the recording after this, and then next week on Wednesday night, we have Organizing for Everyone, Build Your Skills, which is general how to build a group and stay strong. And the week after that, on June 24th, we're having another Black Lives Matter rural strategy session to dig into what the strategy we need to be holding in the weeks and months to come should look like. So continue to join us, and thank you all so much again for all the work that you're doing. Have a good night.
Good one.
Thanks, Ahjamu.
Thank you.